What if you could walk into a room that holds more gold than most countries will ever own? 400,000 bars, stacked on shelves that stretch across an area the size of 10 football pitches, behind a door that requires a key almost a meter long. In 1836, a man did exactly that. He came up through the floor. He stood in the middle of it all. And he did not take a single bar. That vault is still there. It is still full. And it is not the only one in Europe that nobody is allowed to enter. There are 7 on this list. One was built over 26 years to protect a dictator who never set foot inside. One holds 111 kilometers of files that destroyed families long after the regime that created them was gone. One has been sealed shut, not because of what might come out, because of what our breath would do to what is inside. Some are buried under mountains. Some are under city streets you have walked on. And one is hidden behind a door that looks like it belongs to an ordinary house. Here are 7 forbidden vaults in Europe. Nobody is allowed to enter. And we are starting in the mountains of Bosnia with a man who spent $4.5 billion building a bunker he would never use. Number 7, ARK D-0, Konjic, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Behind a small, unremarkable house along the Neretva River, a tunnel stretches 200 meters into a mountain. At the end of it, 6,500 square meters of underground rooms, arranged in a horseshoe, connected by corridors lit by 6,000 neon bulbs. Conference rooms, strategic planning offices, communication centers, dormitories, 2 kitchens, and 1 private suite, with a bedroom, a bathroom, and a direct line to the Yugoslav military command. That suite belonged to Josip Broz Tito, the Cold War leader who held 6 Balkan nations together as one country for 35 years. In the West, he was a curiosity. In Yugoslavia, he was the state. In 1953, Tito ordered the Yugoslav army to begin building a nuclear bunker. It would protect him and 350 of the country's most important political and military figures in the event of an atomic war. The complex was designed to sustain a direct hit from a 20-kiloton bomb, roughly the size of the one that destroyed Nagasaki. It could keep everyone alive for 6 months. The construction took 26 years, $4.5 billion at the time. SEAS workers were blindfolded on the way to the site and only allowed to see once they were inside the mountain. According to testimonies from the builders, not a single shift passed without a fatality. When it was finished in 1979, exactly 16 people knew it existed, 3 generals and 13 soldiers who maintained the facility. All of them had sworn an oath of secrecy. The people of Konjic, the town right next to it, had no idea. Tito died the following year. He never visited. The bunker sat ready for a war that never came. Then, in 1992, a different war did come, the Bosnian War. A Serbian general ordered the bunker destroyed. Soldiers rigged it with explosives, but 2 members of the detachment, quietly, without telling anyone, cut the detonation wires during the evacuation. But the bunker survived, and in 2011, NATO declared the facility had no military value. It opened to the public for the first time. Today, Tito's Apocalypse Shelter holds 159 works of contemporary art by 119 artists from 39 countries. 86 of those artists have represented their nations at the Venice Biennale. Art historians have called it one of the most remarkable collections in southeastern Europe. 5 soldiers guard the entrance. From a vault that holds art instead of a dictator, to one that held 15 billion marks, and the police who guarded it did not know what was inside. Number 6, the Bundesbank bunker, Cochem, Germany. Somewhere in the forests of the Rhineland, about 100 kilometers from Frankfurt, She's the German central bank built a bunker in 1964. Its purpose, to store an emergency currency, 15 billion German marks in cash, printed, packaged, and hidden underground, just in case the Cold War turned into hyperinflation. For 24 years, this was one of the most closely guarded financial secrets in Western Europe. The bunker had reinforced walls, its own diesel generators, 18,000 liters of fuel, a deep well for drinking water, and a 40,000-liter reserve tank. In the event of nuclear war, it could shelter 100 civilians for 2 weeks. Here is the detail that makes this entry. The local police were notified whenever the alarm was triggered, but they were never told what was inside. They were guarding something they did not understand, for a reason nobody explained. It's in a building they were not allowed to enter. Only the facility director could go inside to listen for sounds through an intercom. The actual vault could only be opened by a small number of Bundesbank employees from Frankfurt. The keys were never stored on site. In 1988, the bunker was decommissioned. The emergency currency was destroyed. Today, the site is a museum, the vault that once held 15 billion marks, open to anyone with a 10-euro ticket. Cochem was one bunker. The next country on this list built 20,000. Number 5, the Swiss Reduit, the Alps, Switzerland. Switzerland has not fought a war in over 500 years, and for most of the 20th century, the entire country was a weapon. When France fell to Germany in 1940, Switzerland found itself surrounded by Axis powers. General Henri Guisan, the commander of the Swiss army, made a decision that would define the country for the next 60 years. He would not try to defend the borders. Instead, he would move the entire military into the mountains. The plan was called the Reduit National, a last line of defense carved into the mountains. If the borders fell, the entire Swiss army would retreat into the Alps and fight from inside the rock. 20,000 bunkers, artillery positions, command centers, hospitals, bakeries, and dormitories, hidden under peaks that looked untouched from the outside. Machine gun nests were hidden behind what looked like ordinary farmhouses. Fake chalets and barns concealed artillery positions, when steel doors in cliff faces led to hangars where fighter jets waited in the dark. One fortress, Sasso de Pina, at the Gotthard Pass, was not declassified until 2001. A photographer named Reto Sturci, who did his military service inside one of these mountains, described his first experience. His sergeant told him to walk down a set of stairs at the foot of a mountain. He went 300 steps down and did not see daylight again for 3 weeks. He said it took him 5 days to learn the layout. The color palette inside these bunkers was the same everywhere. Mustard yellows, rose pinks, pistachio greens. Not because anyone cared about design, but because psychologists had determined those were the colors that made months of subterranean living bearable. Switzerland kept explosives wired to every bridge connecting it to Germany until 2014. That is not a typo, 2014. After the Cold War ended, the bunkers lost their purpose, but the Swiss, being Swiss, found new ones. In the town of Stanstadt, a company grows organic mushrooms in 11 former bunkers. Near Giswil, a cheesemaker ripens 90,000 wheels of raclette in 200-meter-long tunnels that used to store guided missiles. The humidity and temperature inside, perfect for aging cheese. And on the Gotthard Pass, one of the old fortresses has been converted into a subterranean luxury hotel. Guests sleep 100 meters below the surface. No internet, no phone signal, no windows. Just rock, candlelight, and the quiet that comes from being inside a mountain that was hollowed out to survive the end of the world. After bunkers and gold and cheese, I need to take you somewhere where the vault does not hold objects. It holds people's lives. Number 4. The Stasi Records Archive, Berlin, Germany. 111 kilometers of files. That is how much paper the Ministry for State Security of East Germany, the Stasi, produced during its 40 years of existence. Files on 5.6 million people. Written reports, photographs, surveillance transcripts, wiretaps, and jars. Jars of cloth soaked in the body odor of people the Stasi had interrogated, stored so that dogs could track them later if they tried to run. The Stasi was founded in 1950. At its peak, it had employed around 90,000 full-time officers and 180,000 unofficial informants. Ordinary citizens who reported on their neighbors, their colleagues, their friends. In some apartment buildings, everyone was filing reports on everyone else. The most effective surveillance state in history, not because of its technology, but because of its people. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Within hours, Stasi officers received orders to begin destroying files. Shredders ran through the night. When the machines broke down, and they did, officers tore documents by hand. But Berlin was not the only office. Across East Germany, citizens who had spent decades being watched understood what was happening. In city after city, ordinary people walked to the local Stasi headquarters and stood in the doorways. Not violently, just standing, blocking the exits, preventing trucks from leaving. On January 15th, 1990, a crowd broke into the Stasi's central headquarters on Normannenstrasse in Berlin. They found rooms stacked floor to ceiling with files. They found the shredders still warm, and they found thousands of bags filled with torn paper, documents ripped apart but not yet destroyed. Those bags are still being reassembled today, by hand, piece by piece. In December 1991, the Stasi Records Act was passed. For the first time, citizens of the former East Germany could apply to read the files that had been compiled about them. More than 7 million people have applied. Many waited months for an appointment, and then they sat in a reading room in the building where they had been monitored and discovered who had been reporting on them. Some found their neighbors, some found their colleagues, some found their husbands, their wives, their parents. One man explained why he chose not to look. "I am not reading that file," he said. "It is not that I do not want to know. It is that I know what knowing would do. It would destroy friendships that survived everything else." Another called her refusal an act of opposition, not against Germany, but against the idea that the file tells the truth. She said, "Why should what is written there be true? It is all the work of criminals." A former Stasi officer is not allowed to enter the archive alone. That rule still applies. And after it was discovered that at least 79 former Stasi members had been hired by the records agency itself, some of whom may have manipulated files, the regulation was put in place. The people who built the vault are forbidden from entering it unsupervised. The archive was absorbed into Germany's federal archives in 2021. The files are being moved to new locations across the 5 eastern states. But the rule remains. And the bags of torn paper, roughly 16,000 of them, are still waiting. If you have made it this far, subscribe. It is free, and I promise you, Number 3 changed how I think about what a vault is. Number 3, the Lascaux Cave, Dordogne, France. On September 12th, 1940, 4 teenagers from the village of Montignac went looking for a dog, and the dog had disappeared into a hole in a hillside. They followed it, and they found a room that had been sealed for 17,000 years. The walls were covered in paintings, bulls, horses, deer, symbols that nobody has been able to decode. Over 600 paintings and 1,500 engravings made by people who had no metal, no written language, and no concept of a world beyond their valley. The pigments had survived because the cave was dry, sealed by a layer of clay that kept water out for millennia. It was the most important discovery in the history of prehistoric art. In 1948, the French government opened Lascaux to the public. 1,500 people a day walked through. They breathed, they sweated. Their body heat raised the temperature. Their carbon dioxide changed the chemistry of the air. And within 15 years, green algae had spread across the walls. White fungus appeared on the paintings. Calcite deposits clouded images that had been perfectly preserved for 17,000 years. In 1963, France sealed the cave permanently. Every other vault on this list is sealed to keep people away from what is inside. Lascaux is sealed to keep what is inside safe from people. Today, the cave sits in total darkness. The temperature is monitored to fractions of a degree. The handful of researchers allowed inside, a few times a year for a few minutes at a time, must wear sterile white overalls, latex gloves, and shoe covers. The only light they are allowed is a small LED strapped to their forehead. In the 2000s, a black fungus spread across the walls despite the closure, which emergency treatments followed. The fungus retreated, but the damage is still visible. France spent $64 million building an exact replica next to the original, Lascaux 4. So people could experience what the cave feels like without destroying it. The replica recreates the air pressure, the temperature drop, even the smell of being underground. It is beautiful, it is precise, and visitors who have been in both say it is not the same. I do not know the answer to the question Lascaux asks. Is it better to lock a masterpiece away forever, or to let people see it, even if seeing it kills it? The 17,000-year-old artists had no idea anyone would find their work. They painted for themselves, or for their gods, or for reasons we cannot imagine. And now their paintings sit in the dark, seen by almost no one. They are protected by the same silence that preserved them in the first place. Lascaux is sealed to protect what is inside. The next vault is sealed to protect what it knows. Number 2, the Vatican Apostolic Archive, Vatican City. 85 kilometers of shelving, 35,000 volumes in the catalog alone, documents stretching back to the 8th century. Letters from Michelangelo complaining he had not been paid for his work on the Sistine Chapel. The handwritten transcript of the trial of Galileo. Henry VIII's request for a marriage annulment with the original signatures and seals. And for 250 years, not a single person outside the Vatican was allowed to see any of it. The archive was formally separated from the Vatican Library in the early 1600s by Pope Paul V. Then for the next 2.5 centuries, it was closed completely, accessible only to the Pope and a handful of senior officials. The shelves grew, the documents accumulated, and the world outside could only guess. In 1881, Pope Leo XIII cracked the door open. Qualified scholars could apply for access. But the process involves academic credentials, a research plan, a letter of recommendation, and an interview conducted entirely in Italian. Even then, everything after 1958 is off limits. The word secret in the archive's old name, it used to be called the Vatican Secret Archive, does not mean what most people think. The Latin word secretum means private, as in personal property, the Pope's personal files, that is all. But the Vatican only thought to explain that in 2019, when Pope Francis officially renamed it the Vatican Apostolic Archive. By then, centuries of novels, conspiracy theories, and one Dan Brown film had done their work. The word secret had become the most famous thing about the collection. One scholar wrote about the archive in 1969. He called it an extensive buried city, a Herculaneum inundated by the lava of time. In 1810, Napoleon ordered his soldiers to load the archive onto wagons and ship it to Paris. 3,239 crates of documents crossed the Alps. Napoleon wanted a Central European archive, and the Vatican's collection was the crown jewel. After his defeat in 1815, most of the crates were returned. Most. What was lost in transit, or quietly kept, has never been fully accounted for. The archive is not a dungeon. It is not guarded by Swiss soldiers with halberds. It is a series of climate-controlled rooms where very old paper is stored very carefully. The real restriction is not a locked door. It is time. There is so much material, and so few people allowed to read it, that scholars estimate centuries of work remain before the collection is fully cataloged. Somewhere on those 85 kilometers of shelves, there are documents that nobody alive has read, not because they are forbidden, but because nobody has gotten to them yet. After the dictator's bunker and the surveillance files and the cave paintings, and 85 kilometers of papal secrets. I want to take you back to where we started, back to the gold, back to the man who came up through the floor. Number 1, the Bank of England Gold Vault, London, England. Beneath Threadneedle Street in the City of London, 2 floors underground, there is a vault that stretches across an area the size of 10 football pitches. It holds approximately 400,000 gold bars. Each one weighs about 12.5 kilograms. The total value, more than 200 billion pounds. It is the second largest gold vault on Earth after the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. The vault was built during the 1930s, excavated more than 15 meters down, encased in reinforced concrete walls 2.5 meters thick. The gold is stored on numbered pallets arranged in rows. It cannot be stacked too high because the floor sits on clay. Even too much weight in one spot would cause the vault to sink. To enter, you pass through a series of locked gates and steel doors arranged in a deliberate maze, designed so that even if someone got past one barrier, they would not know which way to go next. There is a comprehensive electronic security system, voice recognition that identifies authorized personnel by sound alone, and a key. A single physical key that measures just under 1 meter long. The Bank of England says it has never been robbed, but in 1836, something happened that came close. The bank's directors began receiving anonymous letters. Someone claimed to have direct access to the gold vault. The directors assumed it was a hoax, but the letters kept coming, detailed, specific. The writer proposed a meeting inside the vault itself. At a time of the directors' choosing, they agreed. Several directors gathered in the vault one evening. They waited. The room was silent. Then a noise from underneath the floor, and a man appeared. He was a sewer worker. During routine repairs beneath the city, he had discovered an old drain that ran directly under the bank's gold vault. He had found a way in through a loose stone and had been able to access the vault from below. He had taken nothing, not a single bar. Instead, he wrote to the directors to warn them. The Bank of England, stunned and grateful, rewarded him with £800. That would be roughly 80,000 pounds today. They fixed the drain, they sealed the stone, and the vault continued. Today, the Bank of England holds gold not just for the United Kingdom, but for roughly 60 other central banks. No member of the public has ever been inside. The vault sits on its bed of London clay, quietly, carefully, holding more wealth in one room than most nations possess. £800. That is what honesty was worth in 1836. A man who could have taken more gold than he could carry chose to write a letter instead. 7 vaults, 7 different reasons to lock a door and throw away the key. In Konjic, a dictator spent 26 years and $4.5 billion building a shelter he never visited. And the people who saved it from destruction turned it into an art gallery. In Cochem, the police guarded a vault full of money they were not allowed to know about. In the Swiss Alps, an entire country disappeared inside its own mountains and now uses the space for cheese and luxury hotels. In Berlin, 7 million people asked to read what a surveillance state had written about them. And some of them chose not to, because the truth was worse than not knowing. In Lascaux, a masterpiece survived 17,000 years of darkness and was nearly killed by 15 years of daylight. In the Vatican, 85 kilometres of shelving hold documents that nobody alive has read, not because they are forbidden, but because nobody has gotten to them yet. And under Threadneedle Street, 400,000 bars of gold sit on clay, guarded by a key the size of a child, in a maze designed to confuse anyone who gets past the door. The things we lock away say more about us than the things we put on display. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. There are vaults in Europe I have not shown you yet, and some of them are still being built.